It's no secret that I love moral oral. Take a look at this playlist if you don't believe me. But one of the questions I've seen a lot is, can I skip Moral Oral Season 1? I can see why people are asking that. It's very different from the rest of the show. Not only that, but most fans seem to agree that it's the weakest season out of all three. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that, but still, I think you should give it a shot. Especially if you're going through the show for the very first time. You need to see Season 1. Let me tell you why. So first off, just because it's not as good as what's to come, doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, I'd say it's pretty good. While it's not anything spectacular, I think it does what it aims to do pretty well. Especially the dark humor. That was the whole point of Moral Oral in Season 1. Being dark, twisted, and hopefully funny. There's episodes like Orel thinking that God's omnipresence means that God is literally inside of him, and then proceeds to get himself in some serious trouble. There's also God-fearing, where Orel's upset that he didn't get scared at the church's haunted house, and then decides that the only way for him to really be scared is to have God be angry at him, so he proceeds to break all 10 commandments. If you think that sounds funny, then yeah, give it a shot. It's just as funny as the premise suggests. However, it is worth noting that there are some bumps in the road. 2 to be specific: God's Chef and Waste. Now, I've already covered God's Chef, so I'm not really gonna get super in-depth into it. So all that I'll say about it is, yeah, it's definitely one of the worst episodes of the show, but it's also not that bad. But that's mostly my perspective. A lot of people really don't like it. And that's because it crosses a line. It's just too gross for a lot of people. Same with Waste. I will say that Waste is a little bit better because whereas God's Chef's pretty monotonous and is the same thing throughout the entire 11 minutes, Waste at least builds. It's not just the same level all throughout. It starts off small and then gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then by the end, it's just gigantic. Like God's Chef though, the joke wears out pretty thin. But like I said, it's not as thin as it is in God's Chef. And if you can stomach what's in these 2 episodes, you'll be just fine. The first season won't throw you off. In terms of writing, there is something you should know about Season 1 though. It's very formulaic. Most all the episodes have the same template, and I'll explain to you what it is. Orel is doing something, and an authority figure in his life, more often than not one of his parents, tells him that it's wrong. Orel goes out of his way to try to do what's right, however, he goes to such an extreme that he ends up causing more damage than before. Orel gets spanked by Clay, who gives him a really backwards moral, and then haha, it's funny. I will admit, that's a downside of the first season. They all kind of play out the same way with a couple exceptions. But still, what it does with the formula, I think really works. It's not like the early incarnations of Scooby-Doo where it's basically the same episode with just a different monster and window dressing. There really is different content. Different character paths, different jokes, different situations, different lessons. That's what keeps the show fresh. Although, I am happy that it strayed away from this formula in Season 2. If you want more information about that, well, hang tight. We're not quite there yet, you know? Another reason you should give Season 1 a shot is because of the shock of what's to come. It gets darker, more serious, and has a lot more focus on the other characters, not just Orel. And then Season 3? Wow, that is a completely different show. But a really good one. So, I don't think I've ever really gone in depth about this in a video before, but I didn't exactly go through Moral Orel in order. My first episode was Help. Yeah. But I did know a lot of the themes at the time, so I did understand what was going on, but I will say that it would have had a lot more of an impact if I saw Season 1 first. It's kinda like what made Doki Doki Literature Club so effective for a lot of people. It started off as one thing that was a lot more lighthearted and fun, and then turned into this. That's Moral Orel, although it's not nearly as sudden. Having the proper build-up will make all the difference. If you skip right to Season 2 and then go into Season 3, it'll still leave an impact for sure. I watched Alone before I watched more than 3 episodes in the first season, and it still left me messed up. But imagine what that would have done if I would have watched the whole thing. And I'm still kicking myself for not going in order. So take it from a guy who didn't watch it that way. If you go in order, you're gonna thank yourself because it's gonna be that much more exciting. And then there's also the aspect of it's gonna make a lot more sense when you get around to Season 3. Contrary to popular belief, Season 1 is not skippable. There's a lot of setup for what's to come, specifically in 3 episodes, which I'll be highlighting right now. The first one is a small one, but it still counts. Loyalty. Yeah, it sets up Joe, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm more talking about Stop Frame, particularly Clay and Blaberta's weird relationship with him. Blaberta obviously pines for him, but he doesn't feel the same way given the fact that he's attracted to Clay, and Clay is attracted to him, but of course he's stuck with Blaberta and can't do anything about his feelings. Now I will say there's some setup in other episodes like Waste, but this is the most important. Why? Because it's the most telling. It's a blink and you miss it scene, but it sets up the dynamic that's going to be present and a driving force throughout the entire show. The next one is Maturity, in my opinion the most underrated episode of all of Moral Orel. A lot of people say that season 2 is where the serious and plot development, character driven stuff started, but no, it started here. The Best Christmas Ever doesn't count, by the way. Yes, I know Adult Swim aired it first, but it's supposed to be the last one in the season, so it doesn't count. Okay? Good. Glad we're on the same page. In this episode, Orel wants to become as mature as he can, and he starts watching a lot of the adults in Moralton for advice. In doing so, he stumbles across his parents having a very heated conversation. Here we finally see the first cracks in Clay and Blaberta's marriage start to show. Contrary to everything we've seen up until this point, they're not the typical happy-go-lucky, supportive 1950s mom and dad from the nuclear family. No, their marriage is terrible and unhappy. Without watching this scene, a lot of the stuff that would come up later in episodes like Numb would seem kinda random. They were happy before this, so what changed? Was it really the writers bending the world so that they can tell more interesting stories? No, not at all. It was here from the beginning, case in point, this scene. But that's not all. Skipping forward a little bit, Orel gets a hold of some of Clay's alcohol and starts drinking, and then ends up becoming just like Clay. He's angry, he's distant, he's aggressive, everything that Orel isn't supposed to be. This is important for a number of reasons. First off, Clay's main goal throughout the entire show is to mold Orel into a little version of himself. To many, it would seem impossible because of Orel's general character. He's the exact opposite of what Clay's supposed to be, like I said a few seconds ago. However, as it turns out, Orel is actually very close to becoming like Clay. All he has to do is give in to what his dad's been saying and he'll end up on the same path. Broken, unhappy, and feeling like he's forever alone. As we see Clay try to instruct Orel throughout the rest of the episodes, we know that this could be very dangerous. Orel isn't going to shrug them off and go back to being all happy. He could end up slipping, and if he does, it could be too late. Skipping forward a bit, it's also important because of the episode Nesting, the penultimate episode in the series. Since the events of nature, Orel has become distant with his dad. He doesn't care about Clay's lessons or spankings. He's his own guy now, and he's got his own walk of life that's different from Clay's. And that's one of Clay's worst fears. We've seen Orel at his lowest. We've seen the, I guess you could call it, bad ending for Orel. And we know now that he's not gonna get there. He's gonna be okay. Seeing this moment will help Nesting have that much more impact. And then the last episode I want to highlight, and I'm sure you all saw this coming, The Best Christmas Ever. By the way, this was the absolute worst choice to pick for the first episode to air. Making this episode go first has the show tip its hand way too early. It's like playing poker with your cards backwards, you're just not gonna win. This is basically a season 3 episode that aired 2 years earlier. It's dark, it's sad, it's full of character growth, and surprisingly, despite being a first season episode, everybody's personalities have already been decided. Clay is grumpy, possessive, and insecure. Blaberta just wants to find happiness but gets really defensive about what she's done, which was admittedly terrible. I think we can all agree on that. Orel's blissfully ignorant of everything bad going on until it's too late, and Shapey's a demon. This is where the seriousness for Moral Orel starts. This is where we start having to look at the characters with a lot more of a critical eye. We have set up before this, like in Maturity, but this is all on display. This is where the Moral Orel that everybody's been raving about starts, and you can't skip it. You just can't. Especially because the next episode ties into it, but still, even on its own, this is important. It's funny that Adult Swim decided to cancel the show because it got too dark when that was always the creator's intention. As you've seen throughout this video, there's been so much setup that there's no way it wasn't going to become the show that it was. Adult Swim getting upset about that is real dumb on their part, just saying. And if you want to hear my thoughts on every episode of Moral Orel Season 1, well, here you go. Yeah, that's right, we're actually gonna do it. I'm reviewing every episode of Moral Orel anyways, and because most of these are kind of the same, we may as well cover them here, right? The Lord's Greatest Gift, perfect way to start off the show. It's funny, it's dark, it's Moral Orel. God's Chef gets old really quickly and does nothing to help itself out. Charity, God's Chef done right. Waste got Chef done slightly better. The Blessed Union, uncomfortable but still dark and funny. Omnipresence, it has a weird sounding premise, but they managed to make it work. Not stellar or anything, you kinda get the joke early on, but like Waste, it builds and builds. God-fearing, even better than Omnipresence. Loyalty, set up aside, it's really funny. And it's also one of the meanest episodes of the show, but not in a bad way. I personally think the comedy here is really effective. Maturity. Again, the most underrated episode of Moral Oral, not the best, but I think it's a standout episode that doesn't get a lot of attention, which is really unfortunate, so let's change that, shall we? And then the best Christmas ever. I'm not going to cover it super in-depth here because I'm actually going to give it its own review for the next episode review video, so all I'm going to say is, don't miss it. And if you're wondering where I'm going to rank all these episodes, well, here you go, look on screen. We've already covered Alone and Geniusis, so they're already here on the screen, but here's my order from favorite to least favorite that we've covered so far. So yes, it may be formulaic, it may not be super deep, but it's definitely funny and has a lot of important things for the future, so you should not miss Moral Oral Season 1. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? What's your favorite episode of Moral Oral Season 1? And are you ready for us to cover the rest of the show? Comment below and let me know, because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. By the way, this is our 11,000 subscriber special, so once again, thank you so much. We've been blowing up like crazy, and I just can't believe it. Both I and Billy, who for the record is the other guy who runs this channel, are amazed with how fast we're growing, and we are so thankful for each and every one of you, even those of you who are just subscribed to dislike or leave stupid comments. We still love you. Anyways, it's time to thank our Patreon executive producers, Leaf Razor, Azarius, Whoopdoo, Michaela Bellamy, MD the Dude, and Blackjack. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Media Mementos video, then consider donating to our Patreon, which has a link in the description below. And now, it's time for the comment of the day. Today's comment of the day goes to Radville, and it's too long for me to read all right now, but you can go ahead and read it here on the screen, or you can go to the Dijonais video and check it out for yourself. They've got some really good insight here, and honestly, I agree with just about all of it. Now, we here at Media Mementos, both me and Billy, we're a little bit nicer to La Cienega, and we're hoping to get into that a little bit more some other day. But yeah, Penny needs some real friends, and fast. Not even Zoe's gonna cut it. She's just kind of a sheep, you know? Alright everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time!